Currency wars. Everywhere I go, people are asking, what's the deal with the currency wars? Where are we at? How's this going to play out? Things of that nature. I'll put the slide up. Kind of a little crazy on there. Financial warfare. This is a good line. I mean, you tell me who you think this is by. Has now officially come to war center stage. The stage of thousands of years has only been occupied by soldiers and weapons. When the history books on the 21st century revise, the section on financial warfare will command our global leaders' utmost attention. As we sit here today, nuclear weapons have become frightening mantelpieces of decoration that have lost their real operational value. Financial warfare, however, has become a hyper-strategic weapon that is attracting the attention of the world and is now more powerful than any single conventional weapon of mass destruction. Traditional kinetic military methods no longer apply. No longer shall we be focused simply on things that shoot or explode, but rather a much more deadly and dangerous game of financial warfare. Type of warfare that can completely cripple an entire nation. Here's who it's by. People's Liberation Army of China. Released a year and a half ago. Somewhere like that. So, as we move forward, this currency thing is huge. And I have to, somehow, that's why I'm hoping that we're going to get this thing recorded. I went ahead, for the folks that are in here, I went ahead and had a gentleman pay him some money to come and DVD this thing, because I knew we were going to have a lot of people not here. So you guys are here that have to leave, or you got to leave early. I'm going to get you a DVD of the thing, and we'll be taken care of. The guys that didn't show up, I'm going to get that. You babies that didn't make it, if I'm on tape, you guys that didn't weather the storm like my friends here, I'm going to still send you the DVD out so you can see this, but I want to make sure everyone is on the same page with what's taking place here, and that I can help you learn this, and you can teach some of your friends and family back home on where we're headed with this, with the government, with the Fed, and these currency wars, and how it's directly going to affect you moving forward. Let's start. I'm just going to give you a prime example so you can make sure we're on the same page. I hope everyone stays awake for this part of it, because I get tired of hearing all the supply and demand numbers and all that jazz. This stuff here is more fun and exciting. Iran. This is what the game changer. Feb 5th of 2012 was the first financial atomic bomb, or what people are calling it. This is inside politics. This is when the U.S. put the hammer down and said, no central banks globally can do business with Iran. If they do, they'll be banned from using the U.S. dollar currency system. That was the first move in the war. Boom. What happens? U.S. dollar immediately dries up in Iran. Remember, U.S. currency, understand this, the U.S. dollar is the currency that makes the world go round. Retailers, now envision you're in Iran, you're a retailer selling cell phones, cameras, computers. You have to buy those from importers in U.S. dollars. You get Iranian money, you go exchange it at the bank for U.S. dollars, you pay the importers to get new goods. All of a sudden the U.S. cuts it off. Let me explain the key time frame on this. 2 weeks prior to elections in Iran. Probably a little strategy there, wouldn't you think? This gets cut off. They couldn't purchase any new inventory. You own a shop. You're selling, I don't care what it is, Levi's. You're selling computers. You cannot buy new inventory. What happens to the price? As your inventory starts to fade, you start raising prices because the shit becomes a lot more valuable real fast because you don't have any to back it up with. Local currency crashes within days. Just happened now, a year ago. Only way to get the U.S. dollar was in the black market. You'd have people from Iraq coming over to Iran. They were transferring money back and forth. What happened is the retailers, though, when they had to go to the black market, say I'm selling the computers, I take my dollars, I go out here to the black market, guys on the street, and they're going to convert it into the U.S., they're going to give me some dollars for my Iranian money. Well, you know they're going to jack the price. And the price just keeps getting higher and higher based on more demand and more demand. Currency's drying up, hyperinflation, that key word again, hits Iran. U.S., obviously, militarily, and understand this now, the U.S. military has brought in some of the leading experts in my business, in our business right here, where they're trading, there used to be guys that traded Swiss francs, D-marks, euros, to try and understand and figure out how to manipulate financial markets, to cripple some of these countries. And they've brought them in and done how they used to do the war games with nukes. Now it's war games with, read the book, Currency Wars. There's the book. It's called Currency Wars. They brought the guy in to play out the war game in the financial sector. What happens? Hyperinflation hits, civil war breaks out in Iran. U.S. thinks this is perfect. It's going to cripple them. They're going to vote this nut out. They're going to vote the guy out of office because all hell's breaking loose. Confiscate privately owned firearms. They do the whole deal. The run on the banks because people needed more money. They couldn't get their hands on the money. Capital punishment goes in place for black market transactions in Iran. March 2012, here's the problem. China, Russia, and India figure out how to develop trade with Iran, because Iran had the oil they want, without U.S. dollars involved. First time since World War II, first time since 1944, any transactions of trade have been done without the U.S. dollar. That's amazing if you think about it. That's a crazy figure. So when we put them into the corner, I think we thought what we were doing was going to work. Little did we know it was going to backfire. First time ever you have China, Russia, and India developing trade with Iran. Oil was sent for gold to India. India shipped gold back to Iran. Gold was traded for wheat with Russia, and China was trading oil for exports. U.S. dollar out of the equation. That's a problem. I'm letting everyone know if the world shifts and the U.S. dollar is no longer the main core currency, you are going to see serious issues and repercussions in our industry. There's no question. You've seen what's happened to WTI crude versus Brent crude. The Saudis decided Brent crude's a better crude oil. I should say WTI crude is a much better grade of crude oil. Used to always trade at a premium to Brent. Saudis decided they were done jacking with the United States and weren't going to trade WTI crude anymore. They were going to hedge and trade only Brent. Now all the hedge funds bail out of WTI crude. Everyone's trading Brent crude. Now Brent's at a big premium to WTI, even though it's a lot shittier grade of crude oil. They just want to debase against the dollar. They don't want to jack with it. Now here we are in this little episode. This thing's playing out. Currency war versus the United States. Watch the headlines as they come across and you tell me if you think there's any issue. Russian Prime Minister advises the Premier of China, do all you can to ban in the U.S. dollar. Here you are, Argentina, Brazil, China, India, and Russia, all cooperating, working. The government has proof that they're working together to build infrastructure and banking systems that no longer use the U.S. dollar. United Nations, first time ever, calls for ideas about banning U.S. dollar. This was within the last 12 months. Iran converted its financial reserves to all gold now. China, India, Russia converting more of their reserves into gold. We've seen this play out more and more. And to real assets. China's out there trying to buy water rights to everything under the sun. Anywhere they can get deep water rights, they're trying to buy them. And they're buying all the real assets they can get their hands on. They're getting their money out of U.S. dollars, trying desperately. Understand how much, they got over $1 trillion in U.S. debt. They can't bail out of the bond market, because if they bail out, they'll cripple the bond market and the house of cards will fall on top of them. What they'll try and do is go to a shorter term treasury, and they'll try and limit some out there, and then they're trying to get out of it by liquidating into more real assets. So when folks talk that China's just going to pull out of buying our U.S. debt, that's probably not the case, but we do have to pay attention to it. Understand this word right here, sovereign wealth funds. You'll see it abbreviated as SWFs. In 2000, 75% of all sovereign wealth funds, sovereign wealth fund are just huge funds that these countries have. The big ones are whoever's producing oil or the big exporters. They have massive amount of money socked away in these sovereign wealth funds. They invest and do things with this money. 75% of it was all kept in U.S. dollars. Now we're down to about 50% and rapidly falling. So there's no question they're trying to get out of their U.S. dollar denominated currencies. U.S. dollar as a percentage of total world supply has plunged from 90% to now 15%. The world as we know it, like I said, I mean, it's changing fast. And so we got to be very aware of where the Fed in the U.S. is trying to take this bad boy. China, let's just talk about who's in it. I mean, it's coming down to China and the U.S., there's no question about it. Will there be a military battle? No, of course not. The U.S. is too far ahead of everyone. Everybody asks, are we going to have a military issue? No. I see it no way happening. Not any time within the next 10 years, probably. Possibly Russia could get a little bit nuts because they tend to beat to their own drummer. China has to have us to survive. I mean, there's no question. Us and Europe. So China's whole economy, biggest fear right here, unemployment. Extra 25 million males in their early 20s right now in China because of their one-child policy, when they were killing the females and keeping the males. Well, now they've got this issue. And the worst thing you want to have, like I've said before, 20-year-old single males with no jobs. It's a bad thing. We all know that. I mean, I got a son out there, 17. That's dangerous enough. Shit, when he's 20, who knows what's going to happen? All hell fly loose. But 25 million males in their early 20s, their second biggest fear is food inflation. So they're going to do everything in their power to increase jobs. So to increase jobs, they got one solution is increase exports. So the export battle is huge. Here's your problem. The U.S. is devaluing the dollar, making Chinese imports way more expensive. Essentially, less export demand equals fewer Chinese jobs. Do we all understand this? As the dollar gets cheaper, you understand the Chinese are going to be able to export less. We got to make sure we're on the same page. So China is royally pissed that we continue to devalue the dollar. I mean, this is a problem. This is a huge thorn in their side. Here you are, 1983. I tried to just put this in the simplest terms we could, like I was teaching my dad at home. My dad was a sheet metal worker. I used to have to come home from Chicago, and he'd ask me all kinds of crazy shit. He's still scared to invest in stocks, and he'll ask me stuff on the phone, and we go through these long conversations. But in 83, a dollar got you 2.71. By the mid-90s, 8.7 won per dollar. So as you can see, today we're around 6.3. Here's your example. Television from China in 1983, if you were going to buy a shipment of them, say for $50,000, by the mid-90s, that whole shipment of TVs would only cost you $15,500. So if you're bringing in a shipment of TVs back here in 83, you're probably not getting a whole lot of TVs, you know? Here you're getting the same amount of TVs for just a fraction of the money. So that's where China's employment became huge. European cars, say in 2000, the exchange rate was close to even. If you wanted a Mercedes, you were paying about $100,000 for a 600, and here you are paying $100,000. So they equaled out. You know, sports car now in America costs you about $133, comparatively speaking, for the same $100,000 sports car. So the euro's gotten hit a little in there, and that's our conversion. That's how this table works. And that's why currencies are so important, and everyone has to realize this is a huge, huge factor. Problem number two, U.S. continuing to print more money means China has to print more money. More money or hot money in the marketplace is going to cause their inflation to go up. Remember what I told you, employment and inflation are their two biggest concerns. We're printing shit out of money and devaluing it. We're hurting them on the employment side, and we're hurting them on the inflation side. So understand, when we print money, the money doesn't stay here. Money goes there. The money goes there, creates hot money. You hear hot money talked about. That means there's just a shitload of money in the marketplace, and you can buy things with it, and you can do things with it. Remember, because we're exporting all of our dollars. They are getting our dollars. As we print them, we export them. They don't stay home. Remember, money has no home. Important rule. Since China wants to keep its currency pegged to the dollar because they're trying to stay even, the dollar weakens. China has to print more wons to buy more dollars. So all of a sudden, now they're getting a flood of U.S. dollars, and they're having to print more wons. So they're getting a ton of hot money. That hot money is that spec money that you hear when they're in buying soybeans and doing crazy stuff. You see the big land bubble or the real estate bubble they're looking at right now. It's because of all the hot money circulating. The problem here in the U.S., we're using additional money to import items, so the hot money's leaving the country. Like I said, big problem in China because the newly printed wons are not exported. Their money is staying home. They can't export their money out because everything's based on the dollar. We're exporting the hell out of it. China's, like I said, we have China in a bad, bad position right here. And they're not, I don't think, going to play fair. Not that we're playing fair, but I'm just letting you know. They're probably not going to be happy. They're currently holding $1 trillion in U.S. debt. Understand what that means. We print, we issue bonds, bills, notes, say we're going to, pay them X amount of dollars. They in turn buy that at a guaranteed rate. They won't blow out, like I said, because it'll collapse upon them. The market's not big enough anymore. They are a big portion of the market. They can't bail out on it. Major shift in holdings, like I said, to more real assets. Agriculture and water are going to be their primary focus. There's no question. We're seeing that across the board. Like I said, deep water rights around the glaciers and deep lakes, and we're seeing that continue as a theme. Next key player here, we have China. We understand what they're up against. You understand that they're going to battle this tooth and nail. They are going to fight us like no tomorrow. Now we have to understand what the U.S. Fed's trying to do because of the recession or because of the crash that took place. Have to understand this, and this is a hard one for people. Fed is owned by the banks, not the government. Fed is not the government. Congress gave total control of money creation to privately owned local banks, regional Fed Reserve banks. Most everyone employed by the Fed is paid by the banks, not the government. Now, the president appoints the head of the Fed. There you have that little connection. Treasury is the government. Fed is not, as far as that's concerned with where we're at with Federal Reserve issues. It was actually created when J.P. Morgan bailed out the banks. And they were worried that when J.P. Morgan and his cronies were no longer around, the banks could be in big trouble. Created the Fed as a last resort to bail out the banks in case the country ever had to run on banks. That's what the Fed was originally instituted for. 3 main duties of the Fed, you can look them up and read them anywhere that you want to research the information. Provide price stability. That means maintain purchase power of the U.S. dollar while helping to prevent inflation or deflation. Bernanke and crew are really worried about deflation, not inflation. That could be a problem. Help reduce unemployment, help businesses better create jobs. Last, and probably most important, lender of last resort in a financial panic. Bail out the banks. In 07-08, those sovereign wealth funds that I talked about, they first tried to bail out Bear Stearns and crew. They first tried to bail out Citi and Goldman. They didn't have enough money. Fed had to come in. Fed had to print money to bail out these banks. So what happened is this: increased money supply. Fed controls money supply. Understand that key ingredient. They're going to increase money supply by purchasing government bonds. Treasury issues bonds, print money, buy the treasuries. Money they buy from a private. You understand? They buy from a private bank or private institution. It's the second hand from the Treasury. So Fed buys from them. That money goes into the circulation and out into the world it goes, and in a way we have it. If they want to decrease money supply and tighten down, they're just going to sell their bond holdings back through the secondary or primary dealers. They'll call them primary dealers. Sell them through the primary dealers. Money comes back. Money's burnt out of circulation. Simple, fairly simple. That's an easy explanation, I guess. Quantitative easing. Simplest form is the Fed printing more money to buy more assets. Like I just said, all they're going to do is print more and buy more treasuries. Right now, they're doing what, $85 billion in asset repurchases a month. A month now. And that's mortgage-backed securities and treasuries, bills, and notes. So they're printing $85 billion, boom, buying it. Taking those treasury notes, socking them away. Or when they invested in Citi, Goldman, the rest of the crew that they bailed out. And they did make money on that. The Fed is a for-profit. I believe they can take I told Tim the other day, I think they can make 6% gross, and then the rest goes to the Treasury. So any money they make or the profit they do make goes back in. They were actually more profitable, I think it was last year, than all the income taxes brought in the U.S. Total, period. So, if you don't think they're profitable, think again. And that money went right back into the government. Fed buys most U.S. debt direct from a group. There you go, I write it in there. Primary dealers. Must understand the Fed controls about 20% of all money flow is all the Fed can control. So when everyone says, oh, the Fed's going to print more money and all hell's going to break loose, they can only manipulate about 20% of the money flow. The other 75% comes from the banks and them lending money and creating loans and putting more money in place by writing loans. So that was the big Achilles heel. They couldn't get the banks to loan the money. So they're trying to print it and they're trying to lower rates and do the things, but the banks were tight on their end. That created a little bit of a hiccup. And the banks will want to argue that the Fed and the U.S. government couldn't get the policy and rules in place correctly, and so they weren't able to make any loans because they didn't know what the hell they were making loans against and how the rules would be applied. So they're both kind of in a little bit of a pissing match. The banks are blaming the government, and the government's blaming the banks a little bit. So understand is what the Fed's going to try and do is create more money flow at this opportunity and time. Here's what I want you guys to take away as this history lesson as we go through this. I think this will bring it all together. In the 70s, they tried to weaken the U.S. dollar by breaking the link to gold with Nixon. I think we go back and pay attention to this. If you guys have never heard the stories or things, inflation skyrocketed in 1965, we're at 1.9%. 77 to 81, cumulative over 50% inflation. It wasn't that the oil prices were sky high necessarily, but you had oil go ripping, gold go soaring from 40 an ounce to over $8.50 an ounce in 1980. But the inflation was killing us. I mean, inflation was just burning higher. It wasn't that there was a shortage necessarily like some people want to play out. They go in and find out after they break the tide of gold, in the 80s, Volcker comes in. He's appointed the Fed chair. He does one of the craziest damn things that they'd ever seen, raises the Fed rate to 20%, close to 20%. At the same time he raises the Fed rate to 20, Reagan gets elected, lowers taxes, and deregulates a lot of the policy. Inflation falls from double digits in the 80s to about 1.1% in 86. Here's the issue. He creates a strong U.S. dollar by doing this, very strong. Encouraged massive imports. So that little picture I showed you where I said, you know, when you went from 50,000 to 15,000 bringing the TVs in your place, yeah, you were ramping it up, boy. We were bringing in imports like crazy. That's, remember when we heard all this, everyone's bumper sticker, Buy America. Everyone went crazy with the Buy America slogans. We were losing jobs like no tomorrow because we were buying foreign items a lot cheaper. That was all there was to it. Here, corn prices, sub $1.50. Understand, if you cheer for a strong dollar, you're probably cheering on the corn prices. I'm just forewarning you, and understand why the corn price has been so high. Dollar's been terribly weak. So this is a big, big takeaway. And Fed rhetoric in the last 2 months has changed dramatically. From going to continue to print money and continue with quantitative easing to now there's a lot of second guessing going on within the Fed. A lot of guys fighting amongst themselves about how this is all going to play out. I'm telling you now, that's not a good sign. I read this report this morning, some knucklehead wrote. Oh, the Fed's all big gung-ho about more quantitative easing, so corn prices are going to go higher. That's history. They're not gung-ho on quantitative easing. They were gung-ho, and each of the minutes that we see released, you see more and more Fed members saying, we need to taper back, we need to stop, we need to chill it out and cut it out now because the debt's running out of control. You go back to this situation, I'm telling you, it'll rectify things, but you ain't going to like what it rectifies. The guys in this room, I mean, some of the retired guys will like it because shit, we'll have interest rates back to 12, 15%. You make some money make some interest on your money. But maybe you better sell your farm ground and put it all in the bank then. You go to the 90s to the mid-2000s, here's the issue. Greenspan becomes chairman. He brings on Bernanke in 2002. I think Bernanke went to work for Greenspan. Both were fearful of deflation and unemployment. Why were they fearful of unemployment? What the hell happened? Right here. Here's what happened. Strong U.S. dollar, remember? We're importing everything. People can import goods like crazy. So we started losing jobs. Well, now all of a sudden he's worried about unemployment and they're worried about deflation. The world starts to change. You got the fall of the Berlin Wall. First time you have globalization in the financial world. The very first time. Bonds in Brazil, underwritten in London, sold in New York. That never used to be the case until you get into this era right in here. Greenspan starts to worry about deflation here in the U.S., decides to move and keep rates super low to encourage spending and growth in business. You guys remember, the rates just started creeping down. What'd the stock market do? Gets overly excited, fuels the tech bubble. Investors continue to look for places to invest more money. All of a sudden, they pour it in. Hot, cheap money. What'd I say? Hot money in the U.S. Moved right into the U.S. housing sector, created another bubble. So now we're sitting here, bubble after bubble, chasing this money. Unemployment starts to become the primary concern. Here you are in 2000. 5.6 mil were unemployed. 01, you can see us creeping higher. Here we are, 2013. There's estimates that that's 25 million. 25 million people. Because they fall off after you quit looking for work, so no one knows what the accurate number is. But we know it's not pretty. Bernanke writes a paper. This is interesting. Bernanke writes a paper in 2002, submits it. It says blueprint document outlining the Treasury could issue debt, buy private stocks from companies, and the Fed could finance the debt by printing more money. I put, sound familiar? As soon as the crash happens in 07, 08, this is what he goes to. Goes back to this document, gets approval, and away we go and start printing. 06, U.S. trade balance with China gone from, we were under 50 bill in 97 to over 250 billion now. China had been exporting what we call deflation. China was exporting cheap labor. They're making the shit for nothing and exporting it over here. So they're exporting deflation to us. That's why they were worried about deflation. That's why they were worried about jobs. Rightfully so. I would be in total agreement. Yuan trades from 2.8 for every US dollar in 83 to around 8.7. 07, we get the major ripples. Like I told you, the sovereign wealth funds couldn't bail us out, so we revert to the Fed. 08, Bernanke implements his plan to print the money, bails out AIG, Citi, Goldman, etc. Here's your kicker here, a little bit of interesting fact. G7 used to be who controlled it all. G7's right here, US, Canada, France, Germany, UK, Italy, and Japan. Guess what? G7 didn't have enough money to bail us out. Bernanke and the would-be powers that be in the world said, we got to bring in bigger boats. So we go to the G20. We said, we'll call it G20 and bring in more countries with more natural resources. So we add some more money. We had China, add Australia, Russia, Saudi Arabia to the mix. The G20 in this November 2008 meeting, G20 goes from a finance meeting where it used to just be financial leaders, just the Bernankes of the world, to all of a sudden in November 2008, G20 turns into global leader presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, kings, and all the hot shots. So the G20 transforms right about here on our timeline, 2008. Now it is the bad boy. It is where all the big hitters, like I said, the prime ministers, the kings, chancellors, that's where they're going to gravitate to. The fear was the world's #1 economy was buckled to her knees. I think we have to pay attention here. The world revolves around the United States. I mean, I don't want to sound like, that I don't know how to say that any clearer than it is, but the world gets really, really concerned when the United States has issues. GDP of the US, China, and EU are 60% of the entire world. That's why the euro is not going to fail. They're not going to let it fail. China in no way can let it fail. Europe's China's #1 buyer. They're their #1 customer. If Europe goes under, China's jobs go right in the shitter. There's no way. China can't allow it. U.S. can't allow it. We can't allow it. So here you go. Go back to Econ 101, and everyone needs to pay attention to this because this is going to help explain a lot of the things that I have to go through with people all the time. 4 components of GDP: consumption plus investment plus government spending plus exports minus imports is going to be your GDP number. Everyone understands this government spending thing? It's in the equation. I mean, this is what it is, and here's the rule. Unemployment causes consumption to stagnate or decline. That's pretty self-explanatory. I think everyone's in agreement. More people unemployed, consumption starts to go down. I want you to envision yourself being the Fed is what I'm trying to do. Investments in business, what happens there? Start to decline because if I own a business, I'm thinking, shit, these people are unemployed, they're not going to consume as much. So I got to taper back. I'm not going to build more warehouses. I'm not going to bring on more laborers. I'm going to relax here a minute and try and hunker this out. What are the Fed's options when that starts to play out? I just nixed this one. That came out and that came out. What do you see left? I'm just going to give you a little hint. It's these two. The only two left. Increased government spending. Well, shit, we're doing a good job of that, I think. I think we got that one covered. This is your culprit here. I'm not a big fan of this Keynesian economics. His theory is that the government should step in when this happens. The government should step in and create the spending that this is not creating. He believed that for every dollar, you would gain like $1.10 or $1.20 in production. I think it's nuts. Obama's group says the same thing. For every dollar that they spend, we spend a shitload of money to have these geniuses come up with this. For every dollar that the government puts in place and spends, it creates $1.54 in production. I call no way. No way possible. Like I said right there, I call bullshit. Options, the other side of it says for every dollar we spend, we create about 40 cents in production. I don't say that's probably a little more accurate. I don't even know if it's that high, but what I'm trying to tell you is this is what they were left with. This is what they did. They raised government spending. Their other option, increase exports. This is huge for you. Why? Because this is how the United States is going to create more jobs. This is how the United States is going to try and get out of this problem. More exports. How are they going to create more exports? Crash the dollar. They have no choice. They got to devalue the dollar. They got to make the dollar so people in Brazil, China, everywhere else can buy more of our stuff with less of their money. So we're going to increase our exports. In return, though, we're going to export inflation to them. They are not going to be happy. We're exporting higher price wages and everything else. Easiest way to devalue our currency, making our goods less expensive when compared to the rest of the world. Lower interest rates. Boom, they hammer the interest rates down. What's that do? Right there. Makes it less attractive for international investors. Who the hell wants to invest here when you can't make any money? You're not going to invest in U.S. dollars. Obama announces export initiative in an attempt to double U.S. exports. This is just textbook. I mean, it's just exactly what we showed you. I mean, this is what their move is. This is what they're going to do. Remember, main three jobs: provide price stability, control employment, bail out the banks. What was their response? Battle deflation by lowering interest rates and increasing government spending. That was their issue right there. Deflation was coming over from China like crazy all around the world. So we lower rates, increase government spending. Number two, battle unemployment by increasing exports. What's happening up in the Dakotas? George, what's happening up in North Dakota? Going like crazy, aren't they? Fully employed. Go up to North Dakota sometime. Enjoy the fun. What do you think, George? Some of those areas are crazy. I mean, what's the price at McDonald's? Minimum wage, 20 bucks? I mean, that's what they're paying, guys. 20 bucks I hear up there. I heard some of the towns are crazy. I mean, so fully employed. What Goldman Sachs say, we're going to be the world's leader in oil exports by 2017. That was 2023, then 21. Now we're down to 2017. We're going to export the shit out of everything in the United States. It's our only way out of this employment issue. Psychology. Here's the one I love. Psychology must be changed to spark consumption. This is what they're going to do. This is in their blueprint. You want to know how they're going to change psychology? What are the two things you check the most all the time? They got to increase. Here's what they got to do: change psychology. You got to feel like you have more money. You have to, whether you have it or not, you have to feel like you have more money. What are two things you track and check the most? House and land prices, stock market. Voila, what are they going to do? They're going to inflate them. I don't know how. That shit, they might be buying the stock market every day for all I know. I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. Bike analogy. I like to use this because I think it's easy. It's easy for guys to understand. The consumer's the bike rider. The Fed is the gears on the bike. One problem, though, is the brakes. If the consumer puts the brakes on, it don't matter what damn gear you're in, you're not going anywhere. That's the problem that they've been having a little bit. No one can control the brakes. Money supply times velocity is the price level in the real GDP. They cannot control velocity. That's you guys, that's me, that's everyone out here. We're seeing that start to pick up a little bit. We're seeing some guys come off the brakes. I think it's because they're trying to change the psychology and they got some fictitious beliefs going on here. I mean, hell, earnings are coming down in the stock market. We're making new all-time highs. You guys see me right about it. There's stocks out there that make all-time highs this last week. I don't know, kind of nuts. Velocity driven exclusively by psychology. The Fed must change perception through propaganda and manipulation. It's their only way, period. You got to change perception. Here's the verbiage they like to use. It's called euphoria of wealth effect. Pay attention to it. Thought is consumers will spend more freely if they simply feel richer. Most widely tracked asset values on short-term basis are stock market, home prices, and land values. Farmland values are up, sky high. Houses up, sky high. Coming back anyway, coming back. Stock market, going to make all-time highs here. Fear of inflation. If people fear inflation, this is the other thing they want to make you fear, is inflation. If you fear inflation, you're more apt to make longer purchases now rather than putting off until later. Like I told you guys last year, if I own a company, I got to be worried that the price of goods tomorrow are going to be more than they are today. If I have that mentality, I'm going to buy and build and progress. If I think they're going to be cheaper tomorrow than they are today, I'm going to sit and hunker down. That's deflation. They can't have that attitude. That's why they're using these techniques to try and battle it. I say a view from 10,000 feet. I just like to say this is my view from up above, kind of looking down. The IMF have gained a ton more power as the world's global central bank. What's happened is this right here. The U.S. Fed basically out of bullets. ECB, this European Central Bank, Bank of England, Bank of Japan, all out of bullets. So who they turn to? Now the big guns, IMF. They're going to magically create money out of thin air way better than the Fed. Shit, they don't have anything on the balance sheets. They're good to go. They're just going to pull it out. Major concern, U.S. more likely could not finance a conventional war of any type at this time. This is some of the fears that are out there in the marketplace right now, is that if some type of war were to break loose or a natural disaster of some sort like Katrina, we couldn't finance it. We probably couldn't pull it off. They're saying that they don't think that we would have the money to make it happen any way, shape, or form. So we're walking on eggshells in that front. The other major concern, the other nations are starting to gather together, like I showed you, China, Russia, Brazil. They're worried the U.S. is going to simply continue to deflate the U.S. dollar because they know we're in a jam and we got to get out of this unemployment issue. So they think we're going to deflate the dollar in hopes of increasing exports and employment. No shit. They're exactly right. That's their only chance. This creates higher inflation, China, Brazil, Egypt, Russia, India, and higher unemployment. They're not going to go for it. That's what I'm telling you. They're not going for it. They've swallowed it for a while, but it can't continue. This devalues U.S. debt and allows them to get paid back in cheaper U.S. dollars, which they're losing money on that front and getting hit on the back end. Solutions all revolve around the IMF, China, Russia, India, Brazil, all discussing ways to reduce the role of the U.S. dollar and how to unhook the chains. So the currency war is in full swing. If anyone tells you it's not, they're not even paying any attention to what's taking place. The bad part is it could affect us in a bad way. These here are called SDRs. IMF, they are wanting to back, and now they got the United Nations on their side. They're wanting to go with what's called SDRs, special drawing rights. These are actual currency. This is actual currency they've created out of thin air. They want the world to move to SDRs. In the 1970s, they used it to help against oil shock. Then in 2009, they helped to bail out the U.S. They just printed up $300 billion of SDRs, said they're worth X amount of money, take it and give it to the U.S. out of thin air. That's what's going to probably transition to. That's what they're wanting to go more towards. The interbanking is more towards these SDRs. Everyone out there is trying to buy gold and hoard gold. I'm not a big fan. I've got a little bit of gold, but that's probably a stupid move on my part. I just don't think we're going to gold. I think the world's tried hard to get away from gold. Right there. They don't like being wrong either. Global leaders have tried for years to get away from gold. They got to get away from gold because, number one, there's not enough. Hell, they say total production ever in the world, 60 by 60 cube. It's all the more gold will fit in. I mean, that's how much gold's produced. So you can't produce enough to create the currency that's needed to drive the world's economies. So the fear is just no way it happens. There you are. It's expensive and extremely slow pace. You can bring on about 1.5% growth a year in gold production. That's about it. So I don't think gold's going to happen. The other thing is, read that bad boy. Executive order created by FDR, April 5th, 1933. I, Franklin D. Roosevelt, hereby prohibit the hoarding of gold coin, gold bullion certificates within the U.S. Blah, blah, blah. All persons are hereby required to deliver on or before May 1st, 1933, to the Federal Reserve Bank or any member of the Federal Reserve, all gold certificates, all bullion. Whoever willfully violates any provision of this order will be fined $10,000 or imprisoned not for more than 10 years. My grandmother tells me stories of when they went through some of the 1920s and her family had a lot of money and then they had no money. Then this went into play. This still exists. It's still in the books. That $10,000 fine right now would be about a $200,000 fine in today's dollars. You had to turn in your gold. $200,000 fine. 1937, we built Fort Knox. On what? Right there. Everyone had to turn in their gold. I told Mark, we were talking in the office the other day, what about gold? I said, shit, you don't think if we go to a gold standard, they're not going to slap you with a huge, there's a thing on here I'll show you, a huge tax, or they're going to confiscate your gold? I guarantee they're going to have you turn into gold. So if you think you're going to catch a big windfall, you're nuts. I mean, if we go to that, government's going to step right in. 1950s, we had over 20,000 metric tons of gold, all because of this little bad boy in effect. Right there, I say it. They call it, there's rumors around, windfall profit tax. Government could hit everyone turning in gold for currency. You're not going to go around and barter. We're past the barter system. You're not going to take a chunk of gold or a gold bar and go use it at the grocery store. You're going to have to turn in your gold for a currency or a form of currency. So when you turn in the gold wherever it's at, government's going to have their hand in the till, trust me. We know that. You guys got to be sharper than that to know they're not going to try and grab that money. They'll hit you with an 80 to 90% windfall tax if gold triple. What if gold goes 5,000 an ounce? And they all convert. The only reason gold goes 5,000 an ounce is everyone converts gold. Then they're going to hit you with that. And they're going to say, well, the only reason gold went to that is because we've made it currency now. So I think you may be fighting a little. You could trade it. I think you can trade it. Gold jumps up 2,000 an ounce, sell it. Something of those nature, along those lines. But I wouldn't be digging holes and just buying gold. I think that's probably not a very smart play. We cannot deflate our way to prosperity. We've seen this every time we try to do this in the U.S. Every time we try and deflate, which is what we're doing now, we end up stumbling on it. And there's a problem. And what comes in the next round is usually the boom in interest rates. We put out there, 2-3 months ago, we started locking in all of our long-term interest rates. When I heard the Fed start to change their rhetoric, you better get on board. You can't beat them. I mean, playing the commodity bubble was good. But if the commodity bubble is going to bust here a little bit, we got to be smart, lock our longer-term rates in. And this is an issue that we have. How to keep they have to keep the U.S. dollar devalued, and they need interest rates to stay low. Yeah, they're definitely going to try. Everyone in the business, or everyone I know, is smart money, is trying to move their money out of U.S. dollar-denominated investments. That's why I went out, joined with another group, bought the farms in Brazil, bought the other operations that we did. We're trying to, and we've done good. There's been good appreciation just in the currency swap alone. Like I said here, invest in the countries, the commodity-rich countries. Savings account. There's savings accounts out there that you can get that invest in currencies of like countries, the pool of Australian dollars, Canadian dollars, New Zealand dollars. Why do you think all these Canadians are coming out and buying all the ground in Phoenix and in Florida? I got a bunch of customers doing the same thing. Their conversion rate is huge right now. They can buy things here, boom, big time, money on the dollar. They've never seen this type of conversion. My wife will tell you Canadians are coming here in Kansas City and buying things because their conversion rate's high. Look for currency ETFs. PIMCO just came out with one called Forex, would be one to look at. Those are ETFs that invest in foreign currencies or how that's going to play out, those types of things. Look at stock. If you're going to go the stock route, like say a company like Coke. I'm just not saying go buy Coke because it hasn't done real well in this whole debacle. But over 2/3 of their sales are from outside the U.S. So if the dollar were to plunge, their non-dollar denominated assets would be worth a lot more in U.S. dollar terms. So maybe look at companies like McDonald's. They got a ton of overseas business into those things. So I would try and make plays on that. I like to use this example as this because it makes it easy, I think. I told my son this the other day about some of his stuff. Lightning bolts striking in the forest. 3 things can happen. Nothing. Nothing can happen at all. Burns down just the tree it hits, or burns down the entire forest, causing a complete catastrophe. We don't know. I mean, no one knows. One lightning bolt. But I know this, if the forest is ripe, meaning it's dry, it's brittle, which I'm telling you now, it's 16.5 trillion in debt? It's brittle. We're brittle right here. Next lightning bolt, we don't know. So you got to be prepared. You have to see what's ahead of you here. You have to know what's coming. It's too late. I mean, when it happens, it's just too late. I guess that's the moral of the story. I say this. I told Jordan, I said, large bolts don't create big fires. Small bolts don't create small fires. I mean, so there's no relevance if it's a big thing or a little thing. I tell him the same. I'll go back. I tell him the same thing with, it's like an avalanche. I mean, there's hundreds of snowflakes falling, but I can't tell you which snowflake is going to land just perfect and create the avalanche. But I'm letting you know the snow is building. So if you don't think there's a currency war taking place and you don't think the financial warfare is in full swing, you need to think again. You need to start looking into things, reading books, reading material, and trying to figure out where you can take some of your wealth that you've amassed through these years and try and get into some diversified areas that may help insulate and protect you from some of those debasing or currency issues that we could see moving forward. So that's really the reason I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention and forefront. Kind of a history lesson, I guess, or an econ class to some degree, but I wanted you to see what the Fed's trying to do. They really don't have any other options. They're doing what they need to try and do. I don't know if the stock market rally is fictional or fact. I would probably say a little more fictional. It's making people feel good. I ran a story the other day and highlighted it. University of Stanford, this is their year they've raised their most funds for giving or what are charitable funds to the college. 07, 08, I mean, everything crashed. Now all of a sudden we're back hitting new records again on people giving. So what they're doing is obviously working. It's pushing things higher, but we may want to be careful as we move forward and be smart. Maybe take your profits, move out a little bit, diversify into some things that you can see coming down the road a little bit further, I would say. And look at it more, like I said, the lightning bolt situation or the avalanche, the snowflake. We don't know which one it's going to be. No one's going to come in waving their hands and say, hey, this is the one that's going to kick your ass. It doesn't happen. It just, next thing, it's on you and boom, it's over with. So I would plan accordingly and plan ahead. That's all I got. Let's take a quick break. We're going to come back with Drew Lerner with the weather, and we're going to roll that route. Thanks, guys.